Welcome to our first show. Thanks so much for joining us. Today we are covering the sometimes overwhelming and often stigmatized topic of mental health. So we wanted to really bring the experts directly to you. So to help us with this conversation today, I'm so lucky to be able to bring to you two experts. We have Dr. Jim Koeppel. He's a credentialized school psychologist and licensed clinical psychologist who has incredible expertise on how social, emotional, and mental health interplays with learning and behaviors. And we also have Cindy Cothran, a licensed professional counselor from Centerstone, which is an organization that provides community mental health services like crisis interventions, school-based therapy, outpatient therapy, telehealth therapy, in-home services, and the Research Institute in over 200 locations across the U.S. And Cindy will be sharing with us her expertise in how school-based services like Centerstone are able to help students even during distance learning. So thank you both for joining us today.
Sure, thank you.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, great. So let's start with Dr. Koeppel. Would love to hear from you. What are the shifts you're seeing now for schools and how they approach student mental health?
Yeah, it's a good question. For years back in the olden days, schools were just educational institutions. That's it. You went there and you had to follow whatever curriculum that the teacher decided to do. And if you did, you did well. If you didn't, well, there were other options for you, I guess. But over the years, schools have become important for the physical well-being, giving food and breakfasts and lunches, and they become very important for the physical health also, with a lot of schools having health centers located in the schools or school districts, and also the mental health. Especially in recent years, there's been a great emphasis on the importance of mental health to learning, and how emotional well-being affects memory and the ability to access curriculum. Currently, now in this particular age, right now of COVID-19, there is a great emphasis and a great shift to what I've seen on looking at mental health, because we're stuck and the whole country is stuck inside, and we are social beings and we need to connect with people, and we're not able to do that. So what I've seen is I've seen a great emphasis on especially connection in this time. Typically through mediums like the one that we're on here, format through some kind of a video platform, or emails, various chats, electronically, that sort of thing. So there's been this great shift, I think, over the long term, and then right now here, immediately, there's been a big emphasis on mental health.
That's great to hear. And Cindy, I'm curious, how have school-based services like Centerstone also done some adjustments recently, given COVID-19 and distance learning?
Oh yeah, as school has let out from being in person, we've had to adjust as well and figure out how to continue to connect with those kids and how to connect with families, because they still, even though they're not in school, they still have the same social emotional learning needs that they had when they were in the school buildings. So we're trying to find ways like, how can we connect to the very best of our ability levels? So we're doing a lot of telehealth, as Dr. Koeppel mentioned before. We use a lot of any kind of private messaging system that we can, like Skype or Zoom or Google Hangouts or any of those that are private. We can even do FaceTime from the iPhones, or if we need to, we can just use plain old phone calls for those people who don't have the great connections that we need. We really love to do the face-to-face videos because we find that kids can get much more engaged and excited, and they can see our faces and we can see theirs, and we can do art therapy, and we can do a ton more kinds of things. But we've done with that. And then also we've made sure that we're doing a lot more community connections to make sure that none of the families that we're serving are missing out or not knowing about the services that the schools are offering or that the communities are offering, so that they have the food resources that they need or the financial resources that they need. Because, it's taking all of us to sort of band together right now to make sure that everybody is well cared for.
That's great to hear. And I think from the perspective even of, if I were a school administrator, just trying to tee up all the community resources and what you're just talking about, the both physical and emotional connection, what tips do you have for schools to get ready for now and even for next year, how to continue to foster these connections, especially for maybe in disadvantaged areas?
If they can figure out any ways to get technology in some of those children's hands, that is a phenomenal advantage. I've seen some of our local schools be able to do some partnerships with local businesses to get iPads or different kinds of tablets in kids' hands, and that has been a huge help. Or to provide Wi-Fi for kids, or to set up connections with local agencies so that they can get Wi-Fi through them. So any kind of thing that they can get set up now is going to be in the advantage for next year, because we just don't know what we're going to face next year. And I think the more we can get prepared today, the more safe and secure the kids are going to feel for next year. And obviously we can still be facing and helping the kids know what to expect for their therapy services next year and their learning needs next year. It's not too soon.
Okay, that is good to know. And it makes a ton of sense. Switching gears just a little bit, Dr. Koeppel, I wanted to focus some attention on learning about the impact of mental health on learning. What happens when we forget about the social and mental well-being of students right now? What would we expect on how they are able to process and engage and learn kind of digitally?
Yeah, that's a good question. And just like before, the question before, we used to not really care so much about mental health in schools or emotional well-being of kids. They were sort of on their own, and their parents had to take care of it. But thankfully, in recent years, the past 20, 25 years or more even, there's been much more emphasis on this. And what has been found unequivocally is that kids that have mental health problems, it doesn't have to be some kind of diagnosable kind of syndrome, but just some emotional difficulties that maybe a lot of us have gone through ourselves or as adults are currently going through. Kids that have these difficulties are absolutely impacted in the classroom. There is no question that learning suffers when kids have emotional or psychological distress. What we see that attention is focused off of the classroom and is more internalized. So kids become more focused on their own sadness or anxieties or whatever issues might be going on with them instead of engaging in the classroom. We also find that memory is affected. There's a seminal study that was done called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study that is actually still continuing and going on now. It's a longitudinal study. It was done through Kaiser and the CDC. And it took a look at the effects of what's called toxic stress syndrome. And that was given to us, or that name was given to us by Jack Schoenkoff, a researcher in Harvard. And what he found is that there's three types of stress. He found that there is positive stress, tolerable stress, and then this toxic kind of stress. And the positive stress is what all of us have gone through, and it's actually a good thing. For a little kid, it might be first day of kindergarten. For a teenager, it might be going on a date. For a young adult, it might be getting a going on an interview, or for an older adult giving a presentation in their job. These are things that are positive, and they help us, and they help us to figure out how to deal with stress and in a positive way. And we usually don't need assistance or help with that. Then there's this other kind of stress called the tolerable stress. And tolerable stress are things that are a little bit more problematic, like a death in the family, for example, where we might need some assistance, we might need some help in dealing with that, either talking with clergy or family members or things like that. And then there's this thing called toxic stress. And that is where there's this chronic, constant type of problem in a child's life or an adult's life. And these could be things like that come with poverty, or with bullying weekly that you never know if it's going to happen, but you're always worried about it for the entire year. Another form, I think, of toxic stress could be what we've got currently, which is the situation with COVID. When you turn on the TV every day, what do you see? You see news about how many people have died, how many people have got the disease, the problems that we're having in government of dealing with the diseases. You see that all the time. And that kind of stress causes problems with our memory, among many other things. But it causes, one of the problems it causes with our memory, it gives out, that kind of stress gives out a lot of different hormones in our bodies, one particularly cortisol, which affects memory, is known to really have adverse effects on memory if it continues to be in there and continues to go through our bodies. So this idea of this toxic stress can't be emphasized enough. And I think that we are seeing that in our kids and in our families and in our staffs and our school systems, where none of us are immune to the effects of that.
That's great to learn, and that might be why I also feel like the days are bleeding in together personally, just because it's hard to remember what the nuances of each day. On that note, Cindy, what are you and Centerstone doing to kind of combat some of these negative effects on learning from things like toxic stress?
Oh, absolutely. Just like Dr. Koeppel was talking about, it's that the whole onslaught of things that are coming at you all the time, and you're just not sure what the next thing is going to be. That's really overwhelming to our brains and our immune systems. So what we want to do for kids is we want to help them create structure and order and go back to those rituals that we're used to. And so that's one of the things that as we're reaching out to do telehealth with the kids, we also want to make sure that we're connecting with the parents and we're talking with them about ways that they can help their kids just feel safe and feel normal and do all those things that they normally do. And maybe even some things that they haven't normally done, like be very structured, create routine. Everybody maybe gets up to have breakfast together. Maybe then we all do this next block in our schedule for the day. And then we all come back together at lunchtime. And then we all maybe take a walk together. So maybe incorporating a lot of physical activity and movement and time outside where that's possible. And then also connecting and talking and spending time together and doing things that are not just online, but are face-to-face, where we're interacting with other, and we're doing those slow sorts of not sort of that old-fashioned type activities. There's nothing necessarily wrong with video games and being online. It's just that we can't do that to the detriment of the actual connections and attachments, because that's what helps us all feel safe. And so those are the things we need to do.
I love that. And just to spend another moment on this concept of kind of blanking out, is there sometimes a correlation if you see a child blanking out in front of a device or a video game? Is that anxiety driven? Is that just they need to kind of space out?
A little bit of both, probably, to be honest. I mean, kind of like us. A lot of times kids don't have the verbiage to say, hey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I don't know what's going on in the world. I'm so overwhelmed. And, especially like a kindergartner, if you think about them, how would they even have the vocabulary to say any of those things? they're going to show it with their actions. They're going to be unable to sit still. They're maybe going to be whiny. They're going to like be a little bit bothersome, kind of just poking at you all the time and kind of getting at things, being a little bit hyperactive maybe. And a lot of that is just a sign that they're disinhibited. They're really stressed out. And so when kids get really stressed out, they act out, or they want to go into a device, especially those older teens. A lot of times they want to go and they want to spend a lot of time just on their devices because they don't think when they're on the devices. They're just being in whatever world the device is bringing to them. But we also know that that gets into a feedback loop that means that they're not dealing with their emotions. So we want to limit the time. It's not bad. We just want to limit it.
That makes a lot of sense. Dr. Koeppel, what ways can administrators and schools help their staff with techniques or tips? It's kind of like what Cindy was just mentioning that helps improve learning. And there's something around crisis interventions that I would love to hear you specifically kind of share with us. Sure. And we'll make sure to have the resources available to everyone watching. You'll see it below the link here.
Sure. Before I talk about crisis intervention, I just want to piggyback on Cindy. Cindy was absolutely correct in saying that there's other kinds of things that we can do to assist with the stress that we have. She mentioned exercise, real important to do. That's well known. Diet is another thing that's important, that we get a good diet and eat our vegetables and our fruits and things like that, and not just concentrate on the meats and so forth. Very important in helping emotion and in regulating our emotions. The other thing too, in terms of toxic stress, what the research has shown is the best device, I guess you can say, to help in toxic stress is other people. What saves us, kids or adults, when we have this chronic stress, is somebody else around who can help us deal with that stress, who can be there for us, who can talk with us. It doesn't have to be somebody with a fancy degree and a psychotherapist. It could be a parent. In fact, most often it is. It's a parent. It could be a teacher. It could be an administrator. And now in this day of COVID, it is absolutely essential and correct to go ahead and make that connection via some kind of a video connection device, like the one that we're doing here now. And that's going to become more important because we don't know how this is going to go. We don't know, if we're going to be online for another month or another year. And it's perfectly fine even to do some of those more technical aspects of helping emotionally, like psychotherapy. Perfectly fine to do online. That's been shown to be efficacious, and that's been going on for years, even over the phone. That's been going on. You asked about crisis intervention, though, and I see this period as really needing that kind of approach, a crisis intervention approach, not necessarily a psychotherapeutic approach, maybe for those kids and adults that do have some real serious anxiety, some serious depression that they're having as a result of this COVID situation. But for the vast majority of us, I think the way to deal with the stress that's going on here is through this crisis intervention type of approach. And there's many different types of curricula that can teach crisis intervention. Three real popular ones. One is crisis intervention stress management, or CISM. Another one is Prepare curriculum, which is developed by the National Association of School Psychologists. Another one is psychological first aid, or PFA, which is done through the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. And all of these have in common, and well, first of all, you can be trained in these. Even PFA, you can be trained online. And most of these trainings for all of these are free or very low cost. typically take about a day. But they all have in common that they want to. You can think of the crisis intervention, as a U, where you start out talking about on sort of a surface level the cognitions, what the person is thinking about the situation, and you can dispel any rumors and myths that person might have. And you go down lower, you talk about the feelings. How do you feel about this situation? Is there an anxiety or depression? And you discuss those sorts of things. And you come back up on the other side of the U, where you talk about, okay, what can you do now about this? Who can you talk to? What kind of activities? Are you a good artist? Does that relieve your stress? Do you want to play a video game? Do you want to talk to a clergy member or a friend, or those sorts of things? So these are all done through crisis intervention, and are an important part of what can be done through this sort of medium, through a video medium.
Fantastic. And again, we'll have the link to some of these resources that Dr. Koeppel was just mentioning below the video for folks to check out. So just to wrap up, I would love to get some closing thoughts from each of you around a tip or a perspective you would share with our school administrators as they support their students. So I'll start with Cindy.
Oh, absolutely. Just for school administrators, that no action is too small. Everything is important that they're doing right now. We all need that sense of connection. We all need to feel that we're in this together. And so whether it's the school reaching out to meet those physical needs, like, food, shelter, clothing, housing, all those sorts of things, or whether it is reaching out to do a video chat like, Dr. Koeppel mentioned, or I've seen some really neat pictures online of school teachers, like standing outside with a sign to say, hey, we miss you and I love you. This is my virtual hug to you. Those make so much of a difference. So don't think that there's any action that's too small to connect. That's really going to make those huge connections in our kids' brains, and that's going to help our kids be much safer, and in fact, help them not end up in those crisis situations and so much of the time.
Fantastic. And Dr. Koeppel, closing remarks for our school administrators?
Yeah, I think Cindy is absolutely right in that connection is key. But I think school administrators need to focus upon their teachers. Their teachers are the ones who are interacting directly with the students and with the families most often. And they're affected by this. None of us are immune. They are feeling anxious. They are feeling depressed. They are feeling out of control sometimes. We all are. So it's important for the school administrators to really put in that effort to connect with their teachers. Hold virtual happy hours, maybe. Doesn't mean you have to use alcohol, but getting together and talking and discussing events or discussing feelings can help the teachers to kind of de-stress, to connect with their administrators, to connect with others, and that can help them be better and more present for their kids.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Cindy Cothran from Centerstone and Dr. Koeppel, for your insights and resources you've provided. Again, check out the links below the video to find all the helpful information we've discussed today, as well as GoGuardian's resources on distance learning. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time right here on Distance Learning Weekly. Thank you.